Next, I'm going to be doing a series of videos repairing an antique or vintage dresser. Antique would be anything over 100 years old. Vintage could be 20 to 50 years old. Plus, I know this dresser is over 70 years old because it was made by the Randolph Furniture Works in Jamestown, New York. And that company existed from the late 1800s till 1945. So we know it has to be pre-1945.
Here's the label on the back of the dresser. You can see it says Randolph Furniture Works. It was bought in Cleveland at Sears Roebuck and Company. Looks like it says 401 chest handwritten on there.
Maybe you have better skills at finding out more about this dresser than I do. You might be able to find more out. If so, let me know what you've learned. I believe it's mahogany. I'm not the best at identifying some kinds of woods. It's definitely not oak or cherry. I believe it to be mahogany, but I'm not really sure. So let's get started. I'm going to show you what's wrong, and I'll show you a good way to go about fixing this. Since this dresser is so old, it's been around a long time, it has a lot of damage to it. A couple things that are wrong with it have to do with the base. The base is broken really bad, which I'll show you in a little bit. There's like a little leg on the bottom that's been broken, and a lot of the parts are loose. At some point, somebody tried to repair it in a way that made the problem worse. So we're going to try to take it apart and rectify that. And that will be the first video. We're also going to do a video, I'm going to show you how to duplicate a part with a router, because I don't have a bandsaw and a scroll saw here at home, so I'm going to use a router to duplicate one of the broken parts and make a new one for the other side. And I'm also going to make a video specifically showing how I'm going to repair the stiles and the rails and some of the inner parts that are broken. And then lastly, I'm going to have a video that shows how to repair the drawers. As with most older furniture, if the original finish is in good shape, it's probably best not to sand it down and refinish it. So there are some flaws with it, but I think overall it's in good enough shape that I want to preserve that. So I'm not going to refinish this. I'm just going to try to get it to where it looks really good. You can see it's split here and it's also split here. At one point they tried to fix it by putting a screw in here, but the screw did not go in very far. So we're gonna disassemble this, and I'll probably have to remake this part, and we should be able to make it strong again. I think I'm gonna go ahead and just take all the screws out and remove the entire base, and then I will be able to, it seems like it's not glued very well. I should be able to snap the entire base off of there, get the base back in good shape, and when I reattach it, I'm gonna wood glue the entire base. These are flathead screws because it's an older dresser. And we'll just do this, we'll go around, we'll just take all these out. Save our screws. I already got these ones. Okay, so I have the screws removed. As you can see, it's starting to come off pretty good here. As you can see, I have it off now. The only part that gave me a little bit of trouble was right here. You have this triangle corner that was actually wood glued at some point. But once I was able to snap that free, it came right off. When I put this back on, I'm gonna go ahead and wood glue that entire base. So now that I've got this base disconnected from the dresser itself, I'm gonna need to fix these corners and stuff. And as you can see, this isn't very solid. It wasn't really glued, it was screwed on. Part of the reason these broke is because they started getting loose, and as they got slid around, it allowed for these sides to be broken. And if you look here, the end grain, or the grain is running this way. So if you slide it to the side, you can easily, with all that weight, you can easily break that. So that's why they have the support here. And actually they designed it to where these little legs were a little longer, so it wouldn't actually be slid on these ends. But since it wasn't attached too well, it allowed for the end on the other side to be broken. So we're gonna make sure all this stuff is glued really well and secure so it won't break again. I need to disconnect these parts that aren't on here right. As you can see, at some point they tried to screw that on and it split the wood. Now it's stuck on there and the screw heads are broke off. So I'm gonna have to work with it a little bit to get apart. I don't want to damage it anymore. But I'm gonna go ahead and get that off. I'm gonna clean it up real good so that I can glue it. And then once that's all done, we'll reassemble it really nicely. As you might be able to tell, this screw was stripped out, which is why they didn't put it in all the way to begin with. And it looks like they actually used some kind of hot melt and some wood glue, and it's just a real mess. And it's hard now, it's been there for years, but I want to clean that off really nice. That way when I go to wood glue it, it will be able to have some nice porous wood to absorb into or soak into to get a good bond. Now you can see I went ahead and cleaned up these parts. I got the metal out of them, the nails, the different hardware that was in there, the screws. And then I took a sharp chisel, I scraped the wood glue and the hot melt glue off of there. And then I went ahead and sanded it. I just kind of sanded where the glue was at. That'll open up the, it'll got it down to raw wood so that when we go to wood glue it, it'll get a nice strong bond. So now I have all my parts. They're cleaned up. I've got all the hardware out of them. I've sanded them down. I'm not gonna mess with the edges like this. You can see how the wood grain split, because if you sand that, it's not gonna go back together appropriately. If you leave it like that and you wood glue it, it's gonna seat itself right back. In the original position, and that's what you want. It'll be a lot stronger. You try to sand that, start messing with that, you have all kinds of problems. Go ahead and I'm gonna fix this part first, where the wood split here. And I'm gonna wood glue that. And to do that, I'm gonna go ahead and make sure the whole surface is covered with wood glue. I really want 100% coverage there. It's gonna ooze out as I clamp it, and I'll be able to clean it up. There's a couple different tricks. For one, we could use maybe a quick grip clamp or a wood clamp. We want to make sure that these lines are lined up properly here. And when we clamp it, and we'll clean it up real good. Another trick that we can use, something we can use for a clamp, we can take some heavy duty clear packing tape and stretch it tight over that, and that can help pull it really tight on some of those areas that are hard to clamp. So I'm going to play it by ear. I'm going to go ahead and put the glue on it and see how tight I can get it, and then I'll go from there. So I went ahead and glued this. I got 100% coverage on that edge. There was a little piece that was split up, and it was coming up, so I made sure I got some glue between that as well. And I went ahead and clamped it. I cleaned the glue off as I'm going. I'm going to go ahead and stand it up. I'm going to make sure it's lined up all the way around. I'm going to clean that glue off. I may need to, after I get that glue off, I may need to put a clamp, another clamp like right here, or some tape. So I did try putting a clamp here, and just the angle of it, it kept wanting to slip off to where it wasn't putting pressure in the right spot. So I cleaned a lot of this excess glue off while it was pressed in, and I'm going to go ahead and secure it with a piece of that strong, the heavy duty packing tape, and then we'll let it dry for a couple hours, make sure it's good and strong. In the end, I was happier with the way it was seating by just using tape for the whole thing. I ended up taking that other clamp off, and I was able to get the tape down on both sides of it.
And when you use that strong packaging tape, you're going to want to stretch it tight around there. Usually I'll fold over a corner so it's easy to get off later. If you're doing that, it is a pretty strong tape. You want to make sure that you're not doing on a finish that's going to peel off. If the clear coat that was used, the varnish or whatever, if it's delicate, you may not want to use this method, because as you pull that off, it could peel the finish off. This is drying. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that this seats really well here. I'm going to go ahead and clamp this. I'm guessing I'm going to just clamp it down to the table there, so it'll sit nice and flat. So as I'm gluing this, I'm just going to go ahead and get plenty of glue on there. Sometimes I would just do a straight bead on things, but you know, I really wanted to get in down into the grains where it's split. I'm just going to use my finger and make sure that it gets down in there, and then I'm going to pair it up with the other one. As I clamp it, I'm going to make sure that it's not slipping around. It should seat itself right back to where it originally was. But after it's clamped good, I'm going to wipe it off, make sure everything's flush. So now I have the clamps on. I might need to turn the lights on here now. It's starting to get a little darker in here. But you can see, actually, you can see the line, but that's because it had been broken so bad. And but it's actually really tight. It's, you know, if I put a little stain in there, you're never going to see it. But it's lined up nice and flush. I just need to clean this glue off, and I'll probably get a damp rag to finish cleaning that off. And like this one too, I'll go ahead and let it set a couple hours. It really doesn't need that long. Wood glue, if you're clamping something tight like this, it usually dries much quicker, but I want this to be good and strong before I start putting screws in it and such.
Take the clamps off. It's been here for a couple hours. Let's work on some other things. It should be nice and strong. And we'll take the tape off.
So there you go. It's back to normal. It's, you know, you can still see the line there. You can still see where the screws were. You can see a little faint line here, but really there's no splinters I'm going to get off of it or anything. It's nice and smooth. Scrape the glue off a little bit. There is a little bit of wood glue left there, but it comes off pretty easy because it's on the finish. So I'm going to go ahead and set the base back on here. And you can see it's holding together. I'm going to put a bead of wood glue under there. I'm just going to screw it back into place. I'll attach this other stuff after that. When I go to glue this, I'm going to try not to glue out too close to the edge. I'm going to get it back toward the back end. You can really see where there's a line where the base used to be. So I'm just going to put a small bead, and I'm going to use my finger as a guide to keep the depth of that consistent. Favor more toward the inside, because if it oozes out into the inside where you're not going to see it, it's better than if it oozes out to the front. I'll have to clean it up. Right now it's upside down, and this has a little bit of an overhang, so it's going to be a little bit trickier to clean while it's upside down. I'm going to go ahead and do that all the way around. So I got the glue down. I went ahead and glued the front of this tab as well, and that's going to give it some strength. I'll just go ahead and line that up there so it's centered, and I'll just lay it back down. And the screw holes, as I begin to screw these in, I'm going to go right into the original holes, so it should find those pretty easily. I might just get most of them started first. If you tighten them all first, you're not going to be able to move it if the holes are a little bit off. It should go right in because those screws are already there. And I can even go into this one. This is where it was broke and where it was split.
I should be safe even going into there with that wood glue. It didn't want to split at all. It's holding really nice. I'll come back and just tighten them. You can see the glue oozing out a little bit there, which is okay. That's good. I didn't put a real heavy bead. You don't need a lot. It should hold just fine. The screws are going to do most of the holding. For all those years that this has been around, there was no glue there. It was just in these places like this. This should make it stronger and prevent some of the problems that it had the first time. And then I'm just going to take a wet rag and get it right down in the corner there and clean out any of that glue. So on the one side, this leg that goes here was broken. It was broken long before we had it. I don't have the piece that goes to it. So I'm gonna take the one from the other side and I'm gonna duplicate it. I don't have a bandsaw or a scroll saw here, so I'm gonna end up using a router, and I'm gonna use the one on the left over here, this one. I'm gonna use it as a pattern. Oh, also, normally I would try to match the same wood type. Right now we're doing the social distancing thing for the coronavirus. We're here at home. The only wood that I have is this pine. So that's what I'm gonna use. You could always, something like this wouldn't be too hard to swap out later if we needed to. So I went ahead and duplicated that part with a router. I'm gonna make another video that shows how to do that. But for now, I'm just gonna move on and show you the next step. After the part's duplicated, cut to size, and sanded, I'm gonna go ahead and drill the holes to screw it into place. And to get that screw in the same spot, or that hole in the same spot on the part that we made, I'm just gonna line these parts up. And because actually the hole on the cabinet that was screwed into is in the same spot, and I'm just gonna go ahead and line that up to get it started. And I'll go ahead and drill it the rest of the way through. Then I'm going to take this bit out, and I'm going to put a countersink bit in to countersink it deeper for that, so the screw will sit down inside of there. That should be good. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Craig jig to put pockets in here for a pocket screw. And basically what that's going to allow me to do is it's going to allow me to screw into this end board. I'm not using the fastener that they have there originally. I'm not going to use anything like that. I'm not wanting to put screws through the outside because you'll see them. So I'm going to go ahead and where it's hidden, I'm going to go ahead and put some pockets in here that'll allow me to put 2 screws in. I want to make sure that the pockets don't hit here, because I want that screw to be able to go in there. This sits a little lower or higher, depending on which way you want to look at it. And so the weight of the dresser is actually going to be setting on this, but this assembly here is going to create the strength. This is going to be glued and screwed to that. So I just want to make sure, I'm just going to give it a little extra strength by putting some wood glue and some screws there. And I'm going to do the same with this one as well. And I'll do the pockets on the inside so that this part will cover it for the most part. So now I have the Craig jig set up to the proper depth. You can move these tabs in and out depending on the size of your screw and the thickness of your end. But this is the right setup for this screw. This is a standard pocket screw. It's got a square tip, so it's nice and strong. And this is a pocket screw bit. It's longer so it can get down in the pocket without the drill chuck hitting the board as you're trying to screw it in. So I'm gonna go ahead and I made some marks where I want my pockets to be. And there's 2 holes in this, so sometimes you can drill 2 pockets side by side. I'm not gonna do that, I'm just gonna use the one. And then I'll line that up with the mark. And I'm gonna go ahead and just clamp it down to my workbench. I'm gonna go ahead and hold it. I'm gonna go right into that guide hole there. Okay. There's my pocket. We'll drill a hole in here after we're done drilling all of our pockets for that to guide that. Clamp it down really nice and tight. As you can see, if you put it here, that screw is going to go through about that far, which, I mean, if you have the side, it's going to go in about that deep into the other part. Now, if you drilled that pocket too deep, it's going to go out the other side, which we don't want. If you didn't have the pocket deep enough, it wouldn't grab enough. So you kind of have to find that place, that setting, to where it's going to grab really nice. I'll just do this one. Now I'm going to drill this hole here, and what I did, I found the center and I drilled at an angle to where it came out for the pocket, so I can have a through hole there. I'm going to go ahead and drill this one. I'm just eyeballing it. If you want to measure it and mark it, you can. Just be careful, you don't want to drill your hand. And then I'll angle it up into that pocket. Next, I'm just going to go ahead and put these back on. I'm going to start with this screw here that they already had in there. That'll get it back up tight where it's supposed to be. Doesn't need a lot, just, I mean, a little bead like that will span most of the edge. Kind of wiggle it around so it, and yeah, I might as well just go ahead and put that clamp on as long as it's not in my way for that screw. Let's see how it goes. I may not be able to, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah, looks like I can, so. Okay, and then I would go ahead and, if you can get to it, clamp it tight this way. Otherwise, when you go to drill in, it might push that part away a little bit. Just snug it up. Don't want to strip it out or anything. Otherwise, it won't be able to hold. Okay. I'll just wipe this excess glue off of here. Although I am going to put the this part back over here in a little bit. I'll probably have to sand that a little bit so it'll seat really nice and flat. So next I'm going to put these legs in here. I already sanded right here. Sometimes I would have sanded the parts before, after I pocket screwed them, because it can lift up and not be perfectly flat there. But when you put the screws in, sometimes it'll expand a little bit there and cause it to bump out. Since I wanted it seated really nice and flat, I went ahead and hit that with a sander. Now I'm gonna put some wood glue on these sides here. And I'm gonna go ahead and put some there as well. This will make it a lot stronger than it was before. Now this one, I didn't pre-drill a hole. We'll see how well it screws in. I think it'll screw in okay because that's pine, and pine's a little softer. I'm just gonna return the original screw into there. I will clamp it. I don't want that moving anywhere. You can see this is just way more stable than it was before. Okay. I may need to pre-drill that a little bit, but we'll see. It might start to grab. It's much easier nowadays because you have a lot of Phillips head screws and you're able to use a drill. It's kind of hard to use a drill or a driver with the flathead screws. Slug it up real good. Gonna remove the clamps. And then I'll wipe off the excess glue with the rag. The last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put this corner piece back in and just put it right how it was to begin with. I'll wood glue that and I'll clamp it there and I'll just let it set till it dries. And that just gives it a little extra strength. Just gonna go up and down a little bit. Get that, let that glue ooze out some. I have to put some kind of spacer block in there. It's actually part of one of the drawers, but I'll use it for now. And then we'll let that dry. Now I have these glued, and I'm gonna let it dry a little longer before I flip it over. It should be fine, but I'm not quite ready to work on the other part yet. The bottom should be good. I would stain this. I'm not gonna worry about it for now. I don't have any stain here that matches. If I were ever to try to sell it, I would obviously find a matching stain and you wouldn't even notice that it's been worked on. So I figured I'd go ahead and flip this dresser over because it's all dry. You can see the base looks good. It's nice and strong. This is the part that was broken really bad. And as you push on it and everything, it's nice. You could slide this thing around and it's not gonna bust. In fact, you can barely notice the screw holes. I could easily touch those up and I could do some tricks to completely hide that and refinish this. But I'm not gonna refinish it because this is the original finish and it actually looks pretty decent. So I'm just gonna leave it like this. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to make another one to show you how I duplicated the part for the leg on the base. And I'm also gonna make another video showing how to fix up the rails. There's other problems with this dresser that I haven't addressed yet. And then I'll also fix the drawers. So go ahead and check those out. I hope you learned something.